My dear brothers and sisters in humanity, we begin by praising the Almighty, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, and sending peace and blessings upon all His prophets, from Adam to Muhammad, peace be upon them all. Let us begin by addressing the foundation of today's topic. Hijab is not a cultural tradition, it is a divine prescription. Just like we obey traffic rules to prevent accidents, we follow divine laws to prevent social chaos. The Creator who designed us knows our weaknesses and the ways to protect us. Now, when we speak about the criteria of a valid hijab, it is important to note that not every piece of cloth that covers a woman is hijab in the Islamic sense. The Qur'an does not merely instruct women to cover themselves, it outlines how they should do so. Let us go through the 6 conditions for a hijab to be valid. First, the extent of the body that must be covered. For a woman, her entire body is to be covered except for the face and hands, according to the consensus of many scholars. Anything beyond this is considered immodest in Islamic teachings. Second, the clothing must be thick and non-transparent. What's the point of covering yourself if the clothing itself reveals the shape and color of your skin? Third, the clothing must be loose, fitting. Tight jeans or leggings may cover the skin, but they define the body. Islam does not merely call for covering the skin, but also for maintaining dignity and modesty in public spaces. Fourth, the attire must not imitate the opposite gender. Islam has clearly defined gender roles and prohibits cross-dressing, as it disturbs the natural balance and identity that Allah has created. Fifth, the dress should not resemble that of non-believers or be a tool of imitation of those who do not share the Islamic ethical system. Sixth, it should not be worn for display or show off, decorated or flashy in such a way that it defeats the very purpose of hijab, to avoid unwanted attention. My dear brothers and sisters, modesty in Islam is not just for women, it is also for men. The Qur'an first commands men to lower their gaze before instructing women to wear the hijab. This system is comprehensive. It protects the society from both ends. Now, let us come to the second part of the topic, the role of hijab in minimizing sexual crime. You see, in today's so-called liberal societies, the numbers of sexual assault, harassment, and exploitation are skyrocketing. From the entertainment industry to the workplace, from streets to schools, crimes of sexual nature are rampant. One may ask, why is this happening? The reason is simple. When you expose the body, you provoke the mind. When indecency becomes normal, perversion becomes common. If a society teaches its men to view women as sexual objects, then how can we expect those same men to respect them? Islamic modesty through hijab deals with the disease at its root. It does not wait for crimes to happen and then bring in laws. It prevents the crime from arising in the first place. A woman in proper hijab sends a message. I am not here to be objectified. I am here with dignity. Approach me with respect or not at all. Moreover, let us analyze it logically. In countries where hijab is widely practiced and modesty is part of the public culture, sexual crime rates are comparatively lower. Whereas in societies where nudity and explicitness are glorified, the opposite is true. Now let us be very clear. Hijab is not a guarantee that no one will ever be harassed. Evil exists in every society, but what we are discussing here is not an exception. We are discussing probability. The probability of assault decreases when society as a whole embraces modesty, respect, and moral conduct. Also, understand this well. Hijab is not oppression. It is protection. The modern world has convinced women that in order to be free, they must undress. But, in reality, they've only become more prone to exploitation. Islam teaches that a woman's worth is far beyond her physical appearance. Her value is in her intellect, her faith, and her morality. And to those who say, why should women cover instead of men learning self-control? Islam says both are responsible. Just like you lock your car to prevent theft, even though stealing is a crime, the hijab is a preventive measure to protect society. In conclusion, dear brothers and sisters, the hijab is a divine commandment, not a fashion trend. It must fulfill 6 clear criteria, not just be a loosely defined covering. It is a tool of social reform, reducing the triggers that lead to sexual crimes. And it honors women, not oppresses them. When we return to the guidance of our Creator, only then can we build a society where both men and women are safe, respected, and valued for who they are, not what they wear. And our final call is, praise be to Allah, Lord of all the worlds. The hijab, as defined in the divine scripture, is not a product of cultural evolution or a response to societal norms. It is a command directly from the Almighty, revealed with wisdom, precision, and purpose. Many people mistakenly associate hijab with regional tradition or patriarchal control, but the Qur'an is absolutely clear in its directive. In Surah An-Nur, verse 31, and Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 59, Allah instructs believing women to lower their gaze, guard their modesty, and draw their veils over themselves. These verses are not symbolic. They are explicit legal and moral instructions. When the Creator commands, obedience is not optional. Just as we do not question why we must pray 5 times a day or why fasting is prescribed in the month of Ramadan, the hijab too is a matter of submission. The problem arises when people attempt to redefine what is already clearly defined. Some argue hijab is in the heart, or that modesty is subjective, but Islam is not based on personal preferences or social philosophies. It is a complete way of life grounded in revelation. The same divine source that outlines the rules of worship also dictates the laws of modesty. It is intellectually dishonest to accept one and reject the other. The hijab is not just about cloth. It is about behavior, intention, and obedience. It is about accepting the guidance of the all-knowing over the ever-changing opinions of society. When people claim that hijab is oppressive, they overlook the fact that many women wear it out of their own conviction, not compulsion. It becomes an identity, a shield, a statement that says, I am not for display. Furthermore, hijab is a tool that brings balance to human interaction. By concealing physical beauty and promoting modest conduct, it helps shift focus from external appearance to inner character. This realignment has powerful consequences. In a world where women are constantly objectified, the hijab restores dignity. It tells society that a woman's worth is not in how much skin she reveals, but in her intellect, virtue, and moral strength. It creates an environment where men and women interact with mutual respect, within clear ethical boundaries. Islam, through the hijab, cuts the problem of social corruption at the root, rather than merely treating its symptoms. When discussing the hijab, one must understand that not every form of covering qualifies as a valid hijab in the sight of the Creator. The term is often misunderstood or diluted to mean any piece of clothing worn on the head or body. However, the Islamic concept of hijab is precise and governed by clear conditions laid out in the Qur'an and the teachings of the Prophet. It is not enough for clothing to simply cover. It must fulfill 6 fundamental criteria for it to be recognized as a proper hijab. The first requirement is that the entire body should be covered, except for the face and hands, based on the understanding of most scholars. This covering must be done in a way that does not attract attention. If the purpose of hijab is modesty, then the clothing must not defeat its purpose by drawing the gaze. The second condition is that the clothing must not be transparent. Transparency contradicts the purpose of modesty, as it reveals rather than conceals. Fabric that allows the skin or the shape of the body to be visible is not considered appropriate. The third condition is that the clothing must be loose, fitting. Tight clothes that hug the body defeat the purpose of concealment. Modesty is not achieved when the curves of the body are visible through fitting clothing. Fourth, the clothing must not resemble that of men. The Prophet specifically cursed those who imitate the dress of the opposite gender. Islam recognizes the fitra, the natural disposition of human beings, and maintains a clear distinction between male and female identities. The fifth condition is that it must not resemble the clothing of non-Muslims. Islam encourages a unique and dignified identity. When Muslims imitate the distinct dress of those who do not follow Islamic values, it becomes a form of cultural and spiritual erosion. The sixth and final condition is that the clothing must not be worn for fame or display. Flashy colors, excessive decorations, or extravagant styles transform the hijab from a symbol of modesty to a means of attention. It is not meant to be a fashion statement. Each of these 6 criteria works together to preserve the sanctity and purpose of the hijab. When even one condition is compromised, the entire concept is weakened. Islam is a religion that addresses the root causes of problems, not just the symptoms. When it comes to the issue of sexual crime and moral decay, the solution is not found in harsher punishments alone or in public outrage after an incident has occurred. Islam takes a preventative approach, an approach rooted in modesty, responsibility, and moral boundaries. One of the most powerful tools in this system is the hijab. It is not merely a dress code, but a psychological and spiritual barrier that reduces temptation and lowers the chance of lustful interaction. In a society where visual stimulation is a major trigger for immoral thoughts and actions, the hijab acts as a filter. It redirects the human gaze from desire to dignity. When modesty governs public behavior, the opportunities for exploitation, objectification, and sexual provocation drastically reduce. It is not a coincidence that sexual crimes tend to be more prevalent in societies where immodest dressing, explicit entertainment, and free mixing of genders are normalized. The constant exposure to sexualized imagery fuels unhealthy desires. Over time, this desensitization lowers the threshold of what is considered acceptable behavior. What begins as visual indulgence can often spiral into verbal harassment, physical assault, or worse. Islam prevents this escalation at the very beginning. The Qur'an commands both men and women to lower their gaze, but then places an additional responsibility on women to wear the hijab. This is not because women are blamed for the actions of men, but because Allah, in His infinite wisdom, has assigned complementary roles for each gender in maintaining moral order. The hijab not only protects women from being objectified, but also trains men to interact with women respectfully, seeing them not as objects of desire, but as individuals with intellect and purpose. It sets a tone for how interaction should take place, free of flirtation, suggestive speech, or visual indulgence. The hijab reminds both parties that they are accountable to their creator. In such an environment, the likelihood of sexual crimes decreases because the conditions that nurture such behavior are not allowed to flourish. It is a complete system where clothing, gaze, speech, and behavior all work in harmony to uphold chastity and mutual respect. The hijab is not an isolated practice. It is part of a broader ethical framework designed to minimize moral corruption and protect the sanctity of human interaction in a world that constantly pressures women to reveal more in order to feel accepted, validated, or empowered. Islam presents a revolutionary concept through the hijab. It shifts the focus from a woman's body to her mind, her values, her character. The hijab is not a sign of backwardness, weakness, or suppression, as it is often portrayed in secular media. It is a sign of liberation, strength, and identity. In a system where a woman is constantly judged by how attractive she appears, how fashionable her dress is, or how perfect her figure looks, the hijab declares that a woman refuses to be defined by such shallow standards. It is a statement of independence from societal expectations that reduce women to mere visual objects. The Islamic dress code elevates her status to one of dignity and honor, where her intellect and piety define her, not her curves or complexion. This is not just a theoretical ideal. In practical terms, the hijab protects women from being subjected to the constant male gaze, which in many environments becomes intrusive, disrespectful, and sometimes dangerous. Women in tight, revealing clothing, whether by choice or societal coercion, often find themselves targets of unsolicited attention, inappropriate comments, and even physical harassment. Islam's command for hijab is not to shame women, but to shield them. It recognizes the reality of human psychology, both male and female, and sets boundaries that benefit everyone. By covering her body, a woman asserts that her body is not for public consumption. She demands to be engaged based on her mind, not her appearance. She takes control over how she is perceived. The argument that hijab is a form of oppression collapses when we listen to the countless women who adopt it proudly, even in hostile environments, despite discrimination and ridicule. These are women who understand that real freedom is not the right to be naked in front of others, but the right to decide what is private, what is sacred, and what is to be shared. The hijab gives her that control. She is not oppressed, she is empowered. When a woman wears hijab out of her own will, based on her faith and conviction, she stands tall against a society that wants to define her through unrealistic standards. She is a leader, not a follower. She is protected, not silenced. She is visible, but on her own terms.